the stand going, I'm not a lawyer, but let's get into day 8 of the Diddy trial. So Gerard Ganon, the special agent from Homeland Security, was back on the stand going over some of the items that were recovered from the raid on Diddy's Miami home. He says in one closet, agents found about 18 pairs of high heels, 3 cell phones inside of a Balenciaga boot, a Gucci bag containing multiple kinds of narcotics, including pills that had a Tesla imprint on it, a $100 bill that later tested positive for narcotics, and a wooden box with the word puffy on it. In another closet, agents found 25 bottles of baby oil and 31 bottles of lubricant. As far as weapons are concerned, agents found a loaded weapon in a suitcase in the guest house, as well as a larger weapon that was wrapped in a towel. After going through those items, Diddy's defense attorney, Tinny Garagos, comes up to do cross-examination, and she seems to highlight the level and intensity of the search. She has Agent Ganon confirm that they used boats, armored vehicles, and about 80 to 90 agents for this search. The agent replies that the use of boats is a common practice, and he says the 80 to 90 agents were not all used at the same time. Garagos then moves on to noting that 6 people were at the house during the search, and they were all kept in handcuffs for an hour. The agent says no, one person in particular wasn't happy and wasn't cooperating with the feds, so he was held in handcuffs much longer. Agent Gannon also confirms that there were 2 rifles found in the closet of the master bedroom, but those weapons were dismantled and not loaded. And with that, Special Agent Gannon is released from the stand. The next witness is clinical and forensic psychologist Don Hughes. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video, she has testified in a number of trials. One of the more notable and recent ones was the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard defamation trial. Also, Dr. Hughes apparently charges $600 an hour and $6,000 for a day in court. Dr. Hughes specializes in trauma and traumatic stress, and after arguments from both sides, the judge ruled that Dr. Hughes can testify about why victims in general stay in abusive relationships, how they cope in those relationships, and why they may not immediately tell people what's going on in their relationships. She is not supposed to testify about the specific people in this case. She's only supposed to be speaking broadly and generally. So in regards to the question from the government about why victims stay in relationships, Dr. Hughes says that it's very common for people to stay in abusive relationships. She says there are psychological bonds, and she goes on to explain that abusers often use methods beyond just physical abuse to make someone feel trapped. She says, quote, it's about the power and control that the abuser has over the victim. She also goes over different kinds of abuse. And so in regards to abuse of the more intimate kind, Dr. Hughes says that because intimacy is such a private event, that particular kind of abuse can make a victim feel shame and humiliation. She says they don't want to talk about it with other people, but they also don't even want to think about it themselves. Dr. Hughes is asked about a victim being financially dependent on their abuser, like a victim having to rely on their abuser for their money, their house, their car, things like that. And Dr. Hughes highlights that in order for a person to leave a relationship, they need money. So she says if the abuser controls all of their money, their house, and their car, it may be harder for that victim to get out. And then she starts to say, quote, taking away her laptop, but then there's an objection from the defense, which the judge sustained, so they move on, because she's supposed to be talking very generally and not about the specific things that happened in this case. Remember, Dr. Hughes then moves on to talking about coping mechanisms that victims may have or how they may deal with what's going on. And she says that victims may try to work it out to stop the abuse, but also because they don't want to lose their partner. She says they may try to minimize or excuse the abusive behavior by saying maybe the abuser had a bad day at work or maybe they were drunk. And according to Dr. Hughes, it's not uncommon for victims to numb or self-medicate themselves in order to physically and mentally deal with what's going on. In regards to speaking out, Dr. Hughes says that it's actually uncommon for victims to immediately talk about abuse when it happens. According to her, victims typically wait months and sometimes even years before they talk about it. However, she says people are more willing to discuss abuse that they experience from a stranger than they are to talk about abuse that they may experience from their partner. Dr. Hughes said, quote, the closer the relationship to the perpetrator, the less likely you're going to be to disclose it. And with that, her direct examination is wrapped, but there's only time for a few questions during cross before the lunch break. But I'll highlight a couple things that the defense said before they broke for lunch. And the first is the defense attorney asking Dr. Hughes if everyone fits in the same box, to which Dr. Hughes says, no, there are categories. And then the defense asked her if people can fabricate emotional responses, to which Dr. Hughes said, yes, they can. So jurors are excused, and then right before the attorneys break for lunch, George Kaplan is brought in, and George Kaplan was mentioned yesterday as an upcoming witness who used to work for Diddy. Kaplan is brought in because he was apparently planning to plead the fifth, but he's now been given immunity. In layman's terms, and why this matters is that the whole point of pleading the fifth is so that you don't say anything that could incriminate you or get you charged with a crime. But if you are given immunity, that is the prosecutor saying, hey, you don't have to worry about being charged with the crime because we promise not to charge you based on whatever you say, except for perjury, but I'll save that for another video. So now that the government has given George Kaplan immunity, he'll be taking the stand and he can't plead the fifth. And if he tries, he could be held in contempt.
We are on day 8 of Diddy's trial, and Special Agent Gerard Ganon is back on the stand, finishing where he left off from yesterday. There were so many images of the items that were found in Diddy's home shown to the jury today, and obviously I can't show 99% of them, but from what I can show you, there were a lot of heels found in Diddy's home, including S-toys as well as rope, which you could see here. Now, I believe it was the New York home that had 1,000 bottles of baby oil, but in Miami, he had 31 bottles of Astroglide, 25 bottles of baby oil. Don't ask me why he has rubber ducks in there. I don't know. And obviously, I can't show you what was in here, but it was a lot of substances. And when I tell you this man had all kinds of substances, I'm not even kidding. There were also 3 cell phones found hidden inside of a Balenciaga boot. The Gucci bag, there was powdered residue that tested positive for K and Snow. Also had pills that tested positive for MDMA that had the Tesla logo on it. And he also had Xanax. Also testified that they found a .45 caliber handgun wrapped in a towel in a red suitcase in the guest house's guard shack. Once he was done talking about everything they found and showed the images as well as the items to the jury, cross-examination began. His attorney tried to point out how this raid was excessive by asking what type of car they came in, to which he said an armored car. Brought up the boat, saying you came in by land and sea, and he said that's common practice. And she said 80 to 90 agents. He said not all at the same time. He said you found 6 people there and you had them in handcuffs for over an hour, and he said no ma'am, just one person who would not cooperate. Now, I found this line of questioning to be a little ridiculous because she tried to ask him if he found any photos of Diddy with the firearms, to which he said no. He tried to say that they didn't have Diddy's fingerprints on the weapons or his DNA, and asked if they had Diddy's DNA at HSI, to which he said, I don't know. Now, this part was interesting because she held up the Gucci bag and said, this was the bag that had the substances in it, right? He said yes, and then she said, I'm going to show a sealed exhibit, which means nobody's allowed to see this, not even the jury, and they have to shut off monitors. And she told the agent, don't say the names of the people in the photo except for my client. The prosecutor asked if they could speak to Diddy's attorneys. The judge said yes, and whatever happened, Diddy's attorney then said, you can take the photo down. So I'm not sure who was in the photo, but my guess is the reason why she brought it up was probably because somebody in the photo was wearing the Gucci bag, and maybe she wanted to prove that it wasn't Diddy's, but we don't know. In my opinion, she probably ended it on the dumbest question because she said, you live in Florida, right? And many people have weapons in their homes, correct? The judge cut her off and said, rephrase the question, and she says, do you have weapons in your home? And he said, yes. He said no further questions, and that's where they ended with this witness. But that was so ridiculous because he's an agent. Of course he has weapons in his home. But also her line of questioning about the fact that Diddy had no photos of him holding firearms, and they didn't find any DNA, fingerprints, or any of that. That proves racketeering. The whole point of that is to say that Diddy had a criminal enterprise, right? That he had other people do his bidding. But you'd have to be a moron to think that they didn't belong to Diddy himself because they were literally found in his bedroom. Anyway, he is done with his testimony, and up next we have Dr. Dawn Hughes, and if you watch the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, then you remember her as an expert witness to Amber Heard's side. And you might also remember how irritated she would get of Elaine, who was Amber Heard's attorney, because Elaine kept calling her Dr. Curry. Anyway, once she's done with her testimony, or if they go on break, I will be back and give you an update. We are on day 8 of Diddy's trial.
Subscribe and hit the like button.
Diddy trial day 8, the warm-up before we get to Kid Cudi. Today we had testimony from someone who raided that house which P. Diddy lived, and from P. Diddy's personal assistant. His personal assistant described working for P. Diddy as being extremely difficult. He used to work very long hours, and he had his job threatened daily. One particular experience is P. Diddy losing it at him because he bought him 2 half-gallon water bottles instead of 1 full-gallon water bottle. Another job this poor schmuck had to do was he had to go and set up the hotel rooms for P. Diddy to do his freak-offs in. But what do you need to do a freak off? Well, the special agent over there can tell us more about that because he raided P. Diddy's mansion. In the mansion, we talked about weapons, we talked about all sorts of naughty stuff, and we also talked about baby oil. So much baby oil. This man was single-handedly keeping the baby oil industry afloat. Now, we didn't get through his assistant today. That's going to continue tomorrow, but we also have our first celebrity, Kid Cudi, who will be giving his testimony about his relationship with Cassie, the way P. Diddy interfered with that or didn't interfere with that, and the fears that he believed Cassie held about it. And he's going to be a very compelling prosecution witness because, let's face it, people are always interested when celebrities are on the stand. I know I am.
I'm not a lawyer, but let's get into what happened after lunch on day 8 of the Diddy trial. Clinical and forensic psychologist Don Hughes was back on the stand for cross-examination, and Diddy's defense attorney starts off highlighting that since Dr. Hughes has not interviewed anyone in this case, she hasn't spoken to Diddy, Cassie, or any of the other victims, all of her opinions are just generalizations. To which Dr. Hughes confirms by saying, quote, "I'm not rendering any opinions about a specific individual." She went on to say that she heard there's someone named Cassie related to this case. In attempting to highlight a bias Dr. Hughes may have, the defense attorney asks her if most of her income comes from court-related work, to which she says no, maybe half of her income does. And then the attorney questions if Dr. Hughes has raised her rate to $600, but Dr. Hughes says that it's been that rate for a while and it's on par with other doctors. The attorney also asked Dr. Hughes if she's ever testified in the defense of a man who's been accused of a crime, to which she says, quote, "I don't evaluate offenders." Now, it seems like the defense team may believe Dr. Hughes knows more about this case than she says, because then they start asking her about her meeting with prosecutors 6 times, what was discussed in those meetings, and if she helped them write briefs, and how to present evidence in a domestic violence case. Once cross-examination wraps up, the government gets up for a brief redirect, and they say the review of filings in this case that Dr. Hughes has done was all related to her expert testimony, and then the defense does a round of recross, and they emphasize that Dr. Hughes's work has almost entirely been for victims of domestic violence, and in one instance, when she was hired to work with Brian Steele on a case where he was defending a woman charged with reacting to domestic violence, but Dr. Hughes was ultimately not used. The judge says move on when those questions were being asked, so I'm not sure the rabbit hole they were about to go down, but from there, Dr. Hughes is excused from the stand. And then George Kaplan, the man who was given immunity right before lunch, was called to the stand. Kaplan says he was initially hired in 2013 as an executive assistant to the chief operating officer of Combs Enterprises, but after 10 months, he was promoted to executive assistant to the chairman of the company, the chairman being Diddy, in September 2014. Now, a little bit of context to go into George Kaplan's testimony is that the prosecutors are basically saying that FOs were used to traffic Cassie and whoever the other victim is. And according to the indictment, the means and method, or the way he was able to have these FOs, or in their words, traffic these women, was by relying on his security staff, his household staff, and personal assistants to book rooms, set up rooms, and clean up rooms. And this is all alleged under the RICO conspiracy charge. Now, that explanation does not include the defense's position and how they are refuting this claim. I just wanted to give you context as to why prosecutors brought this witness in and gave him immunity. So George Kaplan says that he worked 80 to 100 hours a week. He made $125,000 starting out, and he reported directly to Christina Coram, who, quote, ran Diddy's life. Kaplan says his job was threatened once a month, and Diddy would frequently say that he only wanted to be surrounded by the best. Kaplan told a story that Diddy once told him to get a gallon of water in a BPA-free bottle, but Kaplan didn't find any gallon bottles, so he instead brought back 2 half-gallon BPA-free bottles, but Diddy angrily told him he didn't bring him what he asked for. Kaplan said, quote, "He was very close to my face." Now, in regards to setting up hotel rooms, George Kaplan said the very first time he set up a room, he was given a backpack that had clothes, a speaker, candles, liquor, baby oil, and lubrication in it, and he was told to unpack it. After that first time, he would travel on Diddy's jet or take a commercial flight prior to Diddy leaving to set up these hotel rooms with those same supplies, and he would use his corporate card to buy more anytime the supplies got low. Kaplan testified that either Diddy or Christina Coram would be the one to tell him when and where he needed to go set up the rooms. After Diddy's sessions were over, George Kaplan said he would go in and clean up the rooms, and there would be Gatorade bottles, liquor bottles, and baby oil strewn all around the hotel room. And he once found a brown crystallized powder on the counter of the bathroom, but he didn't know what it was. Kaplan said it was implied that he needed to clean these rooms up instead of allowing hotel staff to do it in order to protect Diddy's public image, which he says he was keen on doing. Kaplan said he found hotels would sell photos to newspapers in order to shame guests. When the prosecutor asked Kaplan if Diddy ever reached out to him from the rooms, Kaplan said yes, for food, clothes, and sometimes narcotics. Kaplan said he picked up narcotics for Diddy once in Miami and once in Los Angeles. He said both times Diddy gave him cash and a number to call. After setting up a time and location, Kaplan would go and meet the person and then exchange cash for a bag. Maybe this is one of the reasons that he wanted immunity, because this sounds like a regular street corner deal. And from there, the day is wrapped and jurors are excused. However, before attorneys leave, Diddy's team says that Gina, the woman Cassie said Diddy was cheating on her with and led to the end of their relationship, is, quote, out of the case. She's not coming. The government then says she's in the indictment. So is she one of the victims? Because her name is not in the indictment. And Diddy's defense team responds, they could get her here and they're choosing not to. I'll submit a letter by 10 p.m. So I'll be checking to see what exactly gets submitted.
Day number 8 of the Diddy trial. I need y'all to drop Ocho in the comments. From what the reports is saying, this might be one of the wildest days in this Diddler trial. So at the end of this video, I want to hear y'all thoughts down below in the comments on what y'all thought about today. So in today's report, you got the Blicky, you got the SCX toys, you got the Astro Glide, and you got the baby oil. You know Diddy like to be slippery wet. Today they had a lot of sidebars. Even Diddy assistant asked for immunity, y'all. I'm gonna take y'all through the reports like I always do. But before we do that, make sure you like and share this video. And if you've been keeping up with me, watching my other videos, drop some fires in the comments. Let me know so I can like y'all shit. So first up was Agent Ganon. He picked up where he left off yesterday. Prosecutors walked him and the jury through a detailed breakdown of what they found when they did that raid at Diddy Star Island mansion. So they said they seized high heels, SEX items in the master closet, 3 phones that were hidden in boots. They say they found the Gucci bag with plastic bottles in it that was tested for residue of liquid meth and MDMA. And I don't know what the fuck MDMA is, so as always, let me know in the comments. And then this man had liquid meth? What the hell was he doing with that? They was astro gliding with the meth? What the hell? Ganon also said this man had Tesla pill drugs. Like, what the hell is that? So Puffy was an addict, and I guess all the people that was around him, he made them an addict. Also said they found a $100 bill, y'all, that had that on it. And I'm not gonna lie, that's not too uncommon. Most of this money that we be touching have that shit on it. I'm not gonna lie. The prosecutors asked Ganon how many bottles of Astroglide and baby oil did Mr. Combs have. Ganon said about 31 bottles of the Astroglide and about 25 bottles of the baby oil. That man loved being oiled down, y'all. Per reports, they said Dre was looking like, what the fuck? This nigga freaking shit. And then they revealed one of the blickies that they found. And then they showed the bullets to the jury like, look. Then they said the defense jumped in on the cross and tried to throw a wrench. Come on now. You really thought I was saying literally? It was like, didn't you know Diddy was leaving the country with his daughters? And they went to a brief sidebar. Then they asked, so you planned that raid knowing no one was going to be home, right? And it says, yes, but we had contingencies. Per reports, they said when they talked about this raid, it was like they was describing a movie. And I'm not gonna lie, this whole shit sound like a fucking movie. Asked Ganon, so how many agents did you do? He goes 80 to 90, but not all at once though. He said when they pulled up, they came with the armored vehicles and they came on boats. He said when they got there, they end up handcuffing 6 people. And they said one person was getting out of line talking crazy. So he stayed in them handcuffs longer than they wanted him to. They started talking about Diddy guest house. They said they was just showing inside the guest house room. And they showed like the music studio. They showed the keyboards, blah, blah, blah. You know what's in the music studio. Next up, the government called a lady to the stand named Dr. Dawn Hughes. She's a forensic psychologist and an expert in trauma and abuse. They said she done testified over 60 different trials, and she came today to explain why people that go through trauma and abuse stay. She said victims cope through appeasement to avoid more violence, more confrontations. He said, and sometimes they minimize the abuse by saying things like, oh, maybe he just had a bad day, or maybe he was intoxicated. Damn, so they just be so fucked up in their head, they delusional. Told the courts, but this is not a long-term strategy. She said it moves from one assaultive episode to the next. But from reports, they said the defense was ready. They was looking at chops. But they said a lawyer named Batch started grilling her hard as fuck. He said, you never testified for a man accused of sex crimes, right? Dr. Hughes goes, correct. He said, so you never evaluate offenders? He goes, I don't. Then he started accusing her of prepping the prosecutors. He said that she had 6 meetings before the trial even started. They said her response was like, with all due respect, sir, I was educating them. But while she was up on the stand, they said they had a sidebar multiple times because of her. Then they said the big moment came when he got on the stand. This was Diddy's assistant. His name is George Kaplan. They said when he walked up on the stand, this man pleaded the fifth. No Henny. Then guess what, y'all? They went to a short break. And when they came back, this man asked for immunity. And they gave it to him. And they said this man just started telling everything. Kaplan said he worked for Diddy, the diddler, from 2013 to 2015. He said it started in New York, and then it went to LA. He said he was paid $125K a year to do everything Diddy told him to do. So if Diddy told this man jump, he said, how high? He said he set up hotel rooms, he unpacked bags, he packed the bags, he got the baby oil, the Astroglide, the candles, every little essential that Diddy needed for his little free time. Ray said, in his words, this is what he said, man, I cleaned everything for him. He said drugs, bottles of baby oil, brown crystallized powders that was left on the bathroom sink. So they asked this man, who bought this stuff? He said, oftentimes it was me. They said with a strong voice, they asked him, did Diddy ever tell you to go pick up some drugs? He said, hell yeah, in LA and New York. Mostly MDMA. So before it ended, they said a key witness named Gina wasn't coming anymore, even though she was supposed to because she was in a...
I was literally about to eat when it just hit me that I think Gina is witness number 3. Remember how right before trial started, we had heard that the prosecutors could not get a hold of the attorney for witness number 3, and that means that person may not be testifying? Well, right as trial ended today, Diddy's attorney said that Gina is out of the case. She's not coming. And then the prosecutor said she's in the indictment, to which Diddy's attorney responded saying they could get her here and they're choosing not to. She is witness number 3 and they couldn't get a hold of her attorney to get her to come, then clearly it's not about them choosing not to. But again, we're not sure if she is witness number 3, but if you don't know her story, she and Diddy were on and off again from 2014 to 2019. She did an interview in 2020 where she had alleged that Diddy was physically, verbally, and emotionally abusive. She alleged that he stomped on her stomach, punched her in the head, and that he would constantly belittle her and compare her to Cassie. And she also claimed that Diddy called her derogatory names daily and pressured her into having an abortion. When talking about the time that he stomped on her stomach, she said, he stomped on my stomach like really hard, like took the wind out of my breath. I couldn't breathe, but he kept hitting me. I was like pleading to him, can you just stop? I can't breathe. She had described Diddy's betrayal, especially after her abortion, saying that he was pursuing and entertaining other women like nothing was taken from her. In her interview, she said, he always told me that it was just only us two. but I always catch him texting other girls and stuff. After my abortion, it was this girl named Jordan, then Jocelyn and Kat, and then recently Lori Harvey. She would obviously be a very important witness to this case, but it sounds like we're not going to hear from her. If that changes, I will let you guys know. I was literally about to eat when it just hit me that I think Gina is witness number 3.
Day 8 Diddy trial update, and y'all, Diddy closet was a mess. Day 8 Diddy trial update, and y'all, Diddy closet was a mess. Okay, first of all, let's address the elephant or the stilettos in the room. Diddy got heels like he a woman. Now, before everybody jump off the deep end, check this out. We know from other artists, they buy Birkin bags or different rollies and stuff like that for when they are dating a girl, so the girl could wear while they with them. This is the thing that famous people do. These is not broke people problems, so don't make it look like Diddy crazy. Now, was he having the heels on in his personal time? I don't know. Ain't nobody said that. But he probably had heels for when women come over and he messing with them. That's something that he wanted to see them in. I'm pretty sure he had different sizes and stuff. They didn't discuss that. Now, they was finding phones all in Balenciaga boots, the big croc ones. Of course you gonna have phones in there. Shit, because you ain't wearing them that much. The rest of the closet, of course y'all know they had rugs in there. And there was other stuff, little lingerie and stuff like that. Everybody acting like they like shocked and stuff. But honestly, bro, of everything we heard, what did you expect to be in his closet? Now, I ain't seen a big baby oil bottle like I seen when they first locked him up and they ran in the house. I ain't seen none of those yet. So I know we got way more photos. Of course, they let go more photos of Cassie. We seen those already. People in the comments saying, oh my God, it's not that bad. Them marks is nothing. We seen people go through way worse stuff. You can't tell somebody how to deal with their trauma. Come on, y'all. Let's be fair. Other than that, Dr. Dawn hit the stand and she basically told how people deal with trauma and how some of the stuff it might look like Cassie was probably okay with or she was in charge of, but in actuality, she was dealing with it in a way to basically suppress Diddy's feelings by making him think that she wanted to do it so that way they wouldn't have any fights and stuff like that. They also talked about love bombing and what were the stages of that. It's a good little morning, I'm not gonna lie. We just going through the simple stuff, but that's what we got so far. I'll give y'all...
It is Wednesday, Diddy trial, day 8, and you know I've got the details for you. If you missed my previous video, new evidence photos were dropped. Make sure you check them out. So back on the stand was Agent Ganon. He's one of the agents that raided Diddy's Miami home. He said he found heels, cell phones stuffed inside Balenciaga boots. Inside the closet was a Gucci bag that contained residue that tested positive for coke and ketamine. The bag also contained smaller bags of pills, including some stamped with a Tesla symbol, and tested positive for MDMA and Xanax. A crystal rock-like substance was discovered inside a wooden box marked Puffy. Investigators in the master bathroom also came upon a plastic bag of pills that tested positive for hallucinogenic mushrooms. A ton of Astroglide and baby oil. Mind you, a lot of this stuff they're going over today is in those photos that I already posted for you. Firearms and ammunition. Some of these, they claim, had serial numbers removed as well. The next person to take the stand is John Hughes, a clinical and forensic psychologist. Ms. Hughes testified that victims of domestic violence often stay with their abusers as they feel there are no better options. Victims who stay in these toxic relationships tend to fall into 3 categories because they feel trapped, they still feel a bond to their abuser, and believe that the act of leaving the relationship
Subscribe and hit the like
is
button.
too complex to achieve. She says domestic violence victims fall prey to psychological, sexual, and emotional abuse, as well as financial dependence, making it all harder for them to fight back and cut themselves loose. The victims suffering from psychological abuse walk on eggshells and focus on how to stay safe in the moment rather than the big picture solutions such as exiting a toxic relationship. Sexual abuse can bring shame, humiliation, which leads to victims to worry about keeping this harm private, which again keeps them from seeking an ultimate end. Emotional abuse leads victims to
Looks like another former Diddy employee will be flipping on him because after the jury walked out of the courtroom and right before the judge went to his lunch break, George Kaplan was brought on the stand. If you've never heard of George Kaplan, he is Diddy's former assistant. Obviously, he was subpoenaed, so he has no choice but to testify, but he told the judge he is pleading the Fifth Amendment because he does not want to incriminate himself. But the prosecutors obviously need his testimony, so they asked the judge to grant him immunity, which means he can now testify and say whatever he wants without the fear of being prosecuted as long as he's telling the truth. Because if he lies under oath, he could still be charged with perjury. Kaplan reviewed the documents, the judge signed off on it, and he officially is granted immunity. We don't really know much of his story, but we will hear when he's on the stand. But what I do know is that he was Diddy's assistant from 2013 to 2015. It's being reported that he quit in 2015 after seeing Diddy physically abusing Cassie. Now that he's granted immunity, we're obviously going to hear a lot more from him, but we are still on Dr. Dawn Hughes. Lunch break is over. She's back on the stand, and I will let you know what she says once cross-examination is over. Looks like another
A gentleman by the name of Gerard Ganon was the lead person from the Homeland Security Special Agent investigation at the home of Sean Combs in Miami. That was in March of 2024. And he testified to what they were able to find in the house. The jurors saw the actual exhibit, so there were times where Mr. Cannon, Special Agent Ganon, was able to open up those plastic bags and show the jurors exactly what was found inside the home of Sean Combs. So more drugs. We've already heard that Sean Combs, from other witnesses, did drugs, had drugs. This is the first time that the jurors were able to really see some of the pictures and then the confirmation from the special agent about what these drugs were. So he described blue pills, black pills, orange pills, pink pills, and many of them testing positive for cocaine, ketamine, MDMA, and other drugs like that. So the jurors heard more about the drugs and also sex toys. There were a few sex toys that were found inside the bedroom, as well as a total of 18 platform heels. What this is supposed to prove, we will find out, but it was a little bit more of the same in terms of what we've heard, but now the jurors were actually able to visibly see it. Throughout this time, when they're showing these drugs and whatnot, I'm looking at Combs' expression. He's pretty stoic. And then I also noticed that during this testimony, 2 of his sons actually walked in. So we weren't sure if we were going to see family members, any of his children today, but we did see 2 of his sons.
Diddy, the trial. Day 8, Dr. Hughes is on the stand. Let's get into it. The government calls this woman, Dr. Hughes, a psychologist, to come and testify, to try to explain away some things. And this is the same psychologist that also testified in another trial, this woman's trial, Amber Heard. How fitting. The government uses Dr. Hughes to cover 3 areas. And the first area they want to get into is to use Dr. Hughes to explain Cassie's choice in staying with Diddy for an entire decade. And the person who's asking the questions is this woman, Mitzi Steiner. Question, what about financial independence? The who controls housing and transportation. Diddy controls a certain lifestyle of housing and transportation, a lifestyle that Cassie wanted to have and didn't want to leave. That's true, right? Now, question, what is the most common coping mechanism? Trying to work it out because of the trauma bond. If Diddy was a broke, she would have had no problem leaving him. Then they have to discuss the delay in making the story. Question, when does the victim finally speak? Answer, in a safe environment or after psychological help. There's a delay of 5 years from the time she makes her claim. Now, there's no doubt she was physically at the Intercontinental Hotel. And then how would you explain this? She's in the safe environment. She has a man, the husband that she has now, and then she goes back to Diddy. The boyfriend just so happens to call on FaceTime. Cassie, did you answer that call to get sympathy from Diddy? How would that call be answered during the middle of the consent? Then they want to use Dr. Hughes to explain the inconsistencies. Oh, it's very traumatic memories are forgotten or recovered piecemeal. There's a reason why people have PTSD. It's so that the mind and body doesn't repeat the trauma. You can't forget it. It isn't like a fine wine. It gets better over time. Now, then we get into the cross. And it was this man, Mr. Botch. And he wants to try to cover a couple areas. First off is Dr. Hughes' limited knowledge. He points out that she had never spoken with Cassie. She hasn't reviewed anything. She doesn't have anything specific to this case. Two, he tries to give the other side of Cassie's claims. Can people fabricate emotions? Answer, they can. Batch. People might go to a civil lawyer to try to make money, right? Objection, objection. And the judge says, let's move on. Don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. Then they want to show that this expert has a bias, that she's trained and she's paid. Question, most of your income comes from court-related work, showing that she's a paid expert. She's paid to play. This is what she does. No, just half of it. Question, you've been retained hundreds of times. You've never come to court and testified in defense of a man accused of a stress crime. Answer, that's correct. I don't evaluate offenders. But you haven't even evaluated Cassie, the accuser in this case. Then, of course, they point out the fact that she's getting paid $6,000 a day. Now,
That's a lot of money.
$6,000. Diddy, the trial. Day 8, Dr. Hughes is on the stand. Let's get into it. The government calls this woman Dr. Hughes.
$6,000 a day, that's a lot of money.
We are on day 8 of Diddy's trial, and Special Agent Gerard Gannon is back on the stand, finishing where he left off from yesterday. There were so many images of the items that were found in Diddy's home shown to the jury today, and obviously I can't show 99% of them. But from what I can show you, there were a lot of heels found in Diddy's home, including S-toys as well as rope, which you could see here. Now, I believe it was the New York home that had 1,000 bottles of baby oil, but in Miami, he had 31 bottles of Astroglide, 25 bottles of...
I already heard that one.
Someone in the courtroom is naming names, and Diddy team look shook. Today's never-ending story. You had the ex-employed forensic psychiatrist and a special agent testifying in the case. Diddy former assistant George Kaplan, he finished up his testimony today, and he had some things to say. He continues to talk about his role in setting up and cleaning Combs' hotel rooms. Now let's talk about these hotel rooms that they were reserved under the name Frank Black. He purposely reserved these names because it was in reference to the late Notorious Big. You know, he had a nickname, Frank White. Weird. As the Combs will have these meetings in the hotel room, Kaplan's job was to protect Combs' image. His job was to enter these rooms before and then after, tidy up the rooms to make sure he looked good. Now, this is the psychiatrist. She has been an expert witness in Diddy case before. Another case. Psychiatrist Dr. Dawn Hughes, she was on the stand and she testified the trauma bond can make a victim unwillingly leave a relationship, explain why it sometimes takes multiple attempts for victims to leave abusive relationships. She said, as the abuse becomes more severe, so does the coping mechanisms. Victims often numb themselves with drugs and alcohol. Special Agent Homeland Security, he actually continued his testimony today. He actually revealed items that were seized during the Diddy raid, which were an AR-15 rifle. The rifles were defaced. Serial numbers were not on them. The collection platform of heels that he had, they said that was evidence for freak-offs. Collecting heels of the women that he took down, weird. I guess Diddy out here collecting evidence of women, their heels that he slept with. So if you got your ladies' heels, they might have been a part of that freak-off. With all the evidence presented, it's just painting a web of control, abuse, manipulation. With testimonies escalating, do you think Diddy's empire is on the verge of collapse, or would he navigate through the storm? Drop your opinions below.
What y'all think?
Up next on the witness stand is board-certified forensic and clinical psychologist.
Hey y'all, this is day 8 of the Diddy trial. They started out today with the federal agent finishing up his testimony. The prosecution questioned him about the things that he found in Diddy's house when they raided his Miami home. They went into Diddy's bedroom and in his closet. Some of the items that they found were boxes of stiletto heels. They also found rubber boots with 3 cell phones hidden in them. Now, I don't know what that was about. They also found residue of METH and liquid MDMA. They said they found a Gucci bag, somewhat like a toiletry bag, full of rugs. They found a wooden custom box with Diddy's name on the top of it. They said they found pills from every color of the rainbow, including pills with the imprint of Tesla, similar to the ones that had the imprint of Barack Obama's face. They also found 31 bottles of Astroglide and 25 bottles of baby oil. In this photo, the federal agent, in this sketch artist picture from the trial, the federal agent is holding up a pow-pow that they confiscated from Diddy's home, along with boxes and boxes of AMO and other smaller firearms. On the defense side, when they cross-examined the federal agent, they complained about how they conducted the raid. The federal agent stated it was routine that they use armored trucks. The defense complained that the armored trucks, they stated that they drove the armored trucks into Diddy's Iron Gate and destroyed it. Then they pretty much wrapped up his testimony. The next witness that they called was Dr. Don Hughes. Dr. Don Hughes is a clinical and forensic psychologist. She has more letters behind her name than the alphabet. The prosecution basically had her testify on behalf of the question that everyone is asking. Why did Cassie stay in such an abusive relationship? She testified that Cassie had a psychological bond, which is a consequence of psychological abuse. The prosecution questioned and asked her, what is psychological violence? She stated it was intimidation, throwing things, telling you what you can and cannot do and where you can and cannot go. The prosecution asked her, what was sexual abuse? She stated it puts a victim in a significant psychological fear. The victim fears that the abuser can expose them in embarrassing circumstances, like sharing compromising videos or pictures to friends, family, or even the public. In my opinion, the prosecution had her testify to clarify why Cassie stayed in her relationship. Though she was being abused physically, mentally, and emotionally, sources believe that this brought a lot of clarity to the jurors, and it was a big win for the prosecution. Up next was Diddy's former assistant, George Kaplan. Now, Kaplan wasn't necessarily scheduled to testify. Sources say that he had formally pleaded the Fifth Amendment, but for some reason, he decided he wanted to testify for the prosecution side. When he arrived to court, the judge gave him immunity, and then he was sworn in to testify. He stated he started out as an assistant, and then in 2014 was promoted to being Diddy's executive assistant. His job was to report to KK daily.
Subscribe and hit the like
She
button.
ran Diddy's day-to-day life, all his schedule. He stated his responsibilities were to carry Diddy's bags, and once Diddy got more comfortable with him, he was given more intimate responsibilities, like setting up Diddy's hotels, making his breakfast, gathering his toiletry, and packing his bags for trips. He stated he felt intimidated by Diddy. He spoke on one occasion when he went to purchase water, he got the wrong size, and Diddy threatened him that he would lose his job. He said he also purchased essentials for Diddy, such as the Astroglide and the baby oil. He also would purchase rugs for Diddy and would use his alias, Frank Black. One thing that really stood out in his testimony, he stated that he would go to the hotel before the hotel cleaning crew would come in. The prosecution asked him, why would he go in and clean Diddy's hotel rooms before the cleaning service came in from the hotel? And he stated it was to protect Diddy's public image. He stated on one occasion when he went in to clean one of the hotel rooms, he said he found a brown crystallized substance that was left on the bathroom counter. He stated in multiple states where Diddy has homes, that he was instructed to go out and pick up bags of rugs for Diddy. While he was giving his testimony, Diddy was once again with his head in his hands, concentrating on writing notes while he was giving his testimony. They wrapped up court right about there, and he will presume his testimony tomorrow. According to sources, the next witness taking the stand tomorrow will be Kid Cudi. What do you got?
Not Diddy co-conspirator pleading the fifth before he get on the stand today. Child, he done came into the courtroom and said he pleads the fifth before he even testified. And the state said, we're willing to give him immunity. Now he done turned on Diddy and about to get on the stand and talk. I told y'all this was a RICO. You got your employees over here committing crimes, lock them up. George Kaplan has taken the stand and he is talking about his role that he played as Diddy's executive assistant. He worked at Bad Boy and he reported directly to Christina Coram. She gave him his assignments every day. His job was to keep the diddler happy. Okay? He testified in court today that he was at first running errands for Diddy, making sure every morning that he woke him up, he had the bathroom and all his things ready in the morning, making sure his breakfast was ready, making his schedule, all of those things. Once Diddy started to trust him more, he then started giving him the task to set up and clean up the FOs. Now, I always wondered, did they have somebody coming to clean up after the FOs? Because when they had talked about in the testimony last week about that baby oil pool, I was like, who was cleaning that up? I know the maids wasn't cleaning that up because, baby, let me tell you, if I was a maid and I walked in to the room and I seen a baby oil pool in the middle of the floor, I'm taking pictures and sending it directly to TMZ because I'm going to talk to my friend girl at the front desk and find out who had booked the room. Okay? He went on to say when the diddler started trusting him, he started giving him cash money to go and get his rugs from the name and the number he had given him to go set up. And he would set up these parties in New York, LA, and Miami. He would go and buy the rugs, set up the room, put the baby oil, the Astroglide, all of the other condiments that they needed to supply these parties, and then afterwards he would go and clean them up. One time he said he went and cleaned up the room and there was brown residue on the bathroom counter. He didn't know what it was, but he knew he had to clean it up because it was his job to protect the diddler. Okay, now we see why he wanted to plead the fifth, because he's committing crimes. You can't be out here buying these things, sir. You can't be out here distributing these things, sir. These are illegal. Okay, this is what they're talking about when they say RICO. This is a co-conspirator, but this co-conspirator has flipped into a community deal, okay? So everything that he did for the diddler, all the crimes that he committed for the diddler, he won't do no jail time for. He was only on the stand today for about 20 minutes, and then they said that they will bring him back in for questioning tomorrow, and then we will have Kid Cudi on the stand tomorrow. They also stated, which I thought was very peculiar, that they're no longer going to call Gina to the stand. Why they not going to call Gina to the stand? Now, you know, Gina used to be the diddler's girlfriend. He cheated on Cassie with her and ended up leaving her and went back to Cassie and then was still seeing Cassie and her. And so the defense team said, well, yeah, she's in the paperwork. Yeah, she's in the indictment, but we're not going to call her to the stand. And the prosecutor was like, she's in the indictment. She needs to be called to the stand. And they're like, well, we're just choosing not to call her. Hope the prosecution don't let that go. Come on, Gina, get on this stand and let us know what you was dealing with, because we know it was more than just Cassie. Not Diddy
Y'all hit the like and subscribe button.
Diddy's former assistant George Kaplan took the stand. He was the final witness of the day. We got about 20 minutes with him, and we will hear more from him tomorrow. I remember during the lunch break, he was the one that told the judge he would not be speaking and he would be pleading the fifth, so the judge gave him immunity. He confirmed that he worked at Combs Enterprise from 2013 to 2015, and he was an assistant. First, he was an assistant to the COO, but said by September of 2014, he was promoted to be Diddy's personal executive assistant. He reported to Christina Coram, also known as KK, and he said that she essentially ran Diddy's life. His job, he says, was everything from packaging bags, arranging meals, setting up hotel rooms, and as trust grew, even managing substances. He worked about 80 to 100 hours a week and said that he was paid $125,000 a year. He described preparing hotel rooms in LA, Miami, and New York, places like the SLS, Bel Air Hotel, Trump International, and the Intercontinental. That he would either fly with Diddy on his jet or arrive early in order to set up the room. Bookings, he confirmed that Diddy used Frank Black, which was a nod to Biggie's alias, Frank White. In setting up the rooms, he would have to unpack a bag, which would have clothes, candles, speakers, liquor, baby oil, and Astroglide, and that was the standard setup. After the hotel visits, he had to clean it up. Said he often found liquor bottles, baby oil, and Gatorade scattered around the room. One time he even cleaned up a brown crystallized powder that he found on the bathroom counter, and he had no idea what it was, but knew it had to be gone. When asked why not let the hotels clean it, he said he believed that the hotels would leak photos to the tabloids. That part of his job was protecting Diddy's image. He also testified that on at least 2 occasions, he picked up substances for Diddy, once in Miami and once in LA. Said on both cases, he was given cash and a contact number, and he would exchange the money for MDMA. He said he would hand the substances directly to Diddy. Kaplan said that Diddy would threaten to fire him monthly, and one of the times was over a water bottle. He wanted 1 liter, and Kaplan brought back 2 half-liters. Diddy got in his face and told him he did not bring what he asked him to. He said Diddy's needs could be anything from foods, iPads, clothes, and even substances. When he asked what he did for Diddy in the mornings, he said make sure everything was in the bathroom and that breakfast was cooked. Confirmed that Uncle Paulie, D-Rock, and Ruben were security at that time, and said that later in 2015, they had licensed security. And that is everything we have heard so far from George Kaplan. He will be back on the stand to testify tomorrow morning, and we will also be hearing from Kid Cudi. Now, I did think we were going to be hearing from Gina, but according to Inner City Press, it doesn't seem to be the case. She was the one that Diddy cheated on.
Kid Cudi is testifying against Diddy tomorrow. Yeah, you heard me right. The bombshell testimony that we're all waiting to hear. The government confirmed today that Kid Cudi will be taking the stand tomorrow to testify against Diddy. And we can expect Kid Cudi to testify about his relationship with him and Cassie Ventura, about how his car was blown up, but 2 weeks before that, his house was actually broken into. And the crazy part is, Diddy is actually being charged with kidnapping a female victim to facilitate the break-in into Kid Cudi's home 2 weeks before his car even blew up. As you can see, under Diddy's RICO charge, he's being charged with trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. That's not even all of the crimes that are falling under that RICO charge, because they say among other crimes, and we know that they are also trying to charge Diddy with distribution of illegal substances. And when the feds put out these superseding indictments, like the one we just saw, they put out an enterprise letter which breaks down more of the charges. This is the enterprise letter with the last superseding indictment, and they clarify that they added changes that the defendant kidnapped and carried and displayed a firearm to a female victim, which is the same exact information that we already saw in the court docs talking about this person named Individual 1, and this same man had his car blown up. It's Kid Cudi. And the crazy part is, this was the day before Cassie Ventura sent that email to her mother saying that Diddy was threatening her and Kid Cudi. It says on December 22nd of 2011, the defendant and a co-conspirator kidnapped an individual at point to facilitate breaking into and entering the residence of another individual, Individual 1. Based off what I've read in the court docs, it seems like another person is the one that came home and witnessed this break-in that would have lived with Kid Cudi at the time. So I don't know how much into detail Kid Cudi will get on this, but there is police records and more that are going to corroborate the situation. And I'd say that female victim herself is going to be the main person to testify about the kidnapping and the break-in of Kid Cudi's home. They have been laying out the RICO since the very first testimony. Multiple times you hear the names brought up of security doing certain things, the assistants like Christina Korm and more. These are the co-conspirators or the criminal enterprise. Let's read the indictment together because they detail each one of these co-conspirators or employees that work to cover up these crimes. Sean Combs, the defendant, used Combs' business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his acts of violence, abuse, and commercial trafficking. These employees include security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors and other close associates that acted as Combs' intermediaries. And this is exactly who you're hearing being brought up in all of these testimonies. Security, assistants, and more. But yeah, Kid Cudi's testimony is about to be a bombshell because these are huge allegations that fall under that RICO charge. And baby, all you have to prove is 2, and you're automatically found guilty of RICO. And we know that 2 of the charges that fall under that RICO are connected to Kid Cudi. But y'all let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments.
Diddy has a message for the public, and he spoke out in the courtroom during his trial. Diddy, in standing up and looking out to the gallery following his trial adjourning for the day, gave a heart to the gallery and said, "I love you all." Now, this is as we are in the 2nd week of Diddy's federal trial. He's been seen multiple times now, blowing kisses to his family and even sharing hugs with them. And now he wants the gallery in the courtroom to know he loves them as well. I'm assuming he thinks the courtroom is full of Diddy fans. Now, Diddy has largely required the presence of his family throughout his trial thus far, with his children and mother frequently being present. Now, as we are in week 2 of this trial, the heat is turning up and Diddy's feet are on the flames. As Cassie's testified, her mother followed her testimony. And now Kid Cudi is preparing to testify. You know, the man who Diddy allegedly exploded his car, all in a jealous rage against Cassie and Kid Cudi being in a relationship. It seems that blowing kisses and sharing hearts with the gallery isn't going to save him now. Let me know what you think about this in the comments.
Clinical and forensic psychologist Dr. Dawn Hughes testified today. She called her testimony subject matter testimony. What does that mean? She generally talked about what to expect from victims of domestic violence.
Right now, Sean Diddy Combs isn't only fighting for his freedom, but also his money. Even with all his legal troubles, Forbes estimates his net worth is still around $400 million. But if he were to be convicted, all of that could be in jeopardy. Why? Because the government could actually seize his assets. People might hear that and think, wait, does that really mean that all of his businesses, all the money he has, could conceivably have been used to finance this? Therefore, it's all fair game?
Yeah, it pretty much is. I mean, this is a very, very broadly phrased forfeiture allegation. It doesn't look like there was any sort of pre-indictment seizures that they're counting towards it. Normally you see things they've already gotten their hooks into. So it's basically just saying if it is an instrumentality or a proceed, we're going to go after it. And they've named the enterprise in a very broad way, the RICO. The RICO is essentially anything he touched in his business world, whether it's, record labels, liquor labels, planes, trains, and automobiles. Basically mean everything is in play. And the other thing is there's a concept called substitute assets. Just when you think you're crawling out of the wreckage and you're down to your last 400 million, you're told, oh, we're also going for substitute assets, which means even if we can't prove that this particular car, this diamond watch, this piece of art is not connected to criminality, it still relates to our overall reward, and we're going to use it as a substitute.
Right now,
Here are the major highlights from the Diddy trial today, May 21st. George Kaplan testified. They dubbed him the cleanup man. He's a former assistant of Diddy, and he was granted immunity to testify. During his testimony, he described prepping and cleaning hotel rooms before and after freak-off parties, removing baby oil, lube, Gatorade bottles, and even brown crystalline powder.
Y'all subscribe and hit the like button.
Of protecting Diddy's image. Kaplan also noted that he was working 80 to 100-hour weeks. He often feared for his job and his safety. And rumor has it, he was only paid $70,000 a year. There was a recap of the Homeland Security raid. Special Agent Gerard Ganon testified about the 2024 raid on Diddy's Miami property. The court saw AR-15 parts, a loaded handgun, lots of different types of drugs, and hundreds of bottles of baby oil, lube, stiletto heels, and Smex items. A forensic psychologist, Dr. Don Hughes, also testified. Now, the defense is challenging Dawn because they're calling her a blind witness with no direct evaluation experience, citing her history of testifying in high-profile cases like R. Kelly and Weinstein. Dr. Hughes discussed how victims of abuse often stay in trapped cycles of control. Behaviors like curling up in a ball are common coping mechanisms was one of the things she said, and I guess that's in relation to some of the testimony that came out about Cassie. Dawn Richard's testimony is still reverberating throughout the trial, even though she testified earlier this week. Her claims are still in a main focus. Dawn testified Diddy once threw a skillet of eggs at Cassie, and that she witnessed violent fights and saw weapons in his circle, basically painting that ongoing culture of fear. Prosecutors did confirm that Kid Cudi is going to testify tomorrow, May 22nd, speaking to his 2011 short relationship with Cassie and the notorious car exploding in his driveway, which was allegedly ordered by Diddy. That's it for today. I will be back tomorrow with
Good Thursday morning. The Diddy case is going to, I think, get pretty interesting today. Every time I wear this suit, I feel I should be like, nights like this, I wish that raindrops would fall. Ain't nobody can do it like Eddie Kane. Kid Cudi is expected to testify today. He is going to testify about an arson. Why is the arson important? Well, because of course the government at some point is going to be proving a RICO. And in proving this RICO charge, they need two predicate offenses. Sex trafficking is possibly one, prostitution is possibly one, forced labor is possibly one, and arson is one. What is arson? Burning somebody's shit that ain't yours, period. So Kid Cudi is going to testify that dude, I'm a dude disguised as a dude looking at another dude. That dude burned my damn car. But there's some interesting legal concepts that you have to talk about with that. First, the RICO, the Corrupt Organization Act, what they have been doing, and you heard from various witnesses, and they're going to try to say that all of these people are inside of the Diddy orbit. They are part of the organization. The purpose of the organization is to help, hey, I'm Diddy. They're trying to help Diddy. Put the baby all on me. They're trying to help Diddy go through his sexual proclivities to engage in commercial sex acts. And all of the stuff that he's done is just to help Diddy get his freak off, period. They're going to say that the whole purpose of him burning down Kid Cudi's car was because his freak-off companion, Cassie, he was upset, and you ain't getting her, she's mine. Here's what's going to be interesting, a couple of the interesting legal concepts that you need to pay attention to. There is a difference between taking the fifth and a difference between immunity. Taking the fifth is what old Mark Furman did in the O.J. Simpson case. I take the fifth on advice of counsel. Taking the fifth usually means I'm not answering anything whatsoever, because if I answer a question, I'm going to incriminate myself. It's going to subject me to criminal and possible civil liability. I ain't saying a damn thing. So, usually, federal courts will not allow a witness to take the fifth in front of a jury. They'll just say, look, master prosecutor, master defense attorney, is that jackass going to take the fifth? Yeah, don't put him in front of my jury. They're not going to allow that to happen. And number two, you cannot answer some questions and say, I'm going to answer all the questions for the prosecution and then take the fifth for all of the fifth. You can't do that. So what has probably happened in this case, and what is important is, remember, this is a corrupt organization. There is not an allegation that Diddy himself was sitting there with a timer underneath a car, casino style, to make sure it blew up. No, he got somebody to do it for him. So the government's got to think, how do I get that somebody to testify? Well, they give you an immunity agreement. If you tell us the truth, we won't prosecute you. So I believe that at some point, someone is going to get on the stand and say, yeah, I blew that shit up. Why? Told me to. Why'd you do that? Because that's how I get paid. I work for Diddy. I think it might be that gracious. The other thing that could end up, is this a word? The other thing that's going to end up happening is there's going to be conversations about hearsay. Remember, we talked about hearsay. Hearsay is an out-of-court statement being used to prove the truth of the matter asserted. So out of court, you need to be able to cross-examine and talk about something. So what could be a problem, generally, is if Kid Cudi gets on the stand and said, Diddy said blank. Well, normally you're like, well, that's hearsay. Diddy didn't say. There's a rule. Something called statements against interest and statement by a party opponent. Diddy is a party opponent, so usually stuff that he says you might be able to get in, but more importantly, there's something called a statement against interest. The purpose of hearsay is to keep out stuff that's not reliable. If there are certain statements that you shouldn't say, and then if you say them, people are like, yeah, you would have only said that shit if you did some shit. Think about the O.J. Simpson thing when he made the comment, yeah, I didn't do it, but if I did it, that's how I would have done it. That's some shit some guilty person was saying when you say that, that has a level of liability. Or Diddy joking about, what car? Who blew your car up? Or making jokes about the car, or stuff like that. That's why the stuff that Diddy has said is allowed to come in, and it's not hearsay, because it is a statement against interest. At the time that it was stated, at the time it was made, it is so against your interest that it has to be reliable, because nobody would lie and make that shit up. That's literally the thought process behind the rule. So that's, I think, what's going to be happening today. You're going to be hearing about immunity. You're going to get people cross-examining you. You blew up the car. You admit the car. You did this on your own. Nobody told you to do that. He's going to say, nah, Diddy told me to do it. And Diddy's going to say, nah, you did it on your own. And I guarantee the way this government's going, y'all going to see some text messages, emails, checks, or some shit like that, possibly. Because otherwise, it's going to be really hard to prove that Diddy had anything to do with that blowing up the car, because you can't just use circumstantial evidence. You need actual tangible evidence. Is there a heart in the house tonight? Stand up. I don't know if like Mace in that video, whatever. That's weird. Take that.
Y'all subscribe and hit the like button.
The Diddy case is going to.
Thank y'all for watching. Stay tuned, subscribe, and hit the like. Thank y'all again for watching.